Michigan voters go to the polls this November, and CMU Public Broadcasting again brings you Meet the Candidates, the election year series that gives you the chance to meet those seeking state and national office.
Hello and welcome again to this edition of Meet the Candidates. I'm David Nicholas, and we welcome this time Kevin Cotter. He is the sitting Republican representative for the 99th District House seat for Michigan, seeking election to a third term to this office. Representative, good to have you back and welcome to our program.
Well, thank you so much, David. I appreciate the opportunity.
For those that don't know, even though you are running for re-election, we take the first couple of moments to give you the chance to give the audience some background about you, your hometown, and past experience that you're bringing to the campaign.
Absolutely. I'm born and raised right here in Mount Pleasant. Went to school just down the road to the south in Shepherd, K through 12. Later, Central Michigan University, graduated with a degree in entrepreneurship and business administration, then on to grad school, also through CMU, and then later law school at Thomas M. Cooley Law School. And that's actually my background, small practice right here downtown Mount Pleasant.
And the 99th District, for those that don't always follow when lines are redrawn and adjusted in off-census years and so forth, give us an idea of the counties, townships, and so forth that are included.
Sure. It includes 26 townships, all of Isabella County, and then 10 townships in Midland County, the more rural townships in Midland County. So a great area to represent. City of Mount Pleasant, and then beyond that, some smaller villages and a lot of rural area.
Running as one who is seeking re-election, there is obviously the chance to identify what you see as the key issues and a chance to point to your own record, having dealt with some of these issues so far, and what you would do if elected to a third term. What do you see as the primary challenges and issues in this campaign?
Well, I think the primary challenges remain much the same as far as the same goals, the same areas. Looking at the economy and jobs. When we started just a couple of years ago, that was the #1 issue, and I believe it still is today. And we've made some good progress toward that end. Looking at approximately 300,000 private sector jobs added in these last 3 years. And I think that it's important to stress private sector jobs. This isn't simply government creating jobs. It's rather working on the environment so that businesses, locally we're seeing much of that, can create the jobs. And so that needs to continue. That we've gone from a point of unemployment in excess of 14% now to about half that, about 7%. But that's not good enough. We need to continue that. And so we've really been building the foundation, changing policies, and allowing the private sector to do what it does. And we need to continue that. I think another aspect is looking at the state's finances. When we started in January of 2011, we had $1.5 billion deficit, which we were able to balance, truly balance without some funny accounting. So that was the first emergency, if you will. We were really in a triage situation. That has now passed, and we've done some really good things within that budget to try to be wiser with the dollars. When we started, there's talk about the rainy day fund. Ours was depleted in this state. Now we're back up. We've been tucking some money away for that next rainy day of $500 million at this point. So I want to continue that, continue responsible budgeting, and then living within those budgets. And then really cool things happen, like the last 2 cycles where we've had surpluses, and we've been able to reinvest that surplus money in roads. Just recently, we were able to get $2.5 million for Isabella County roads. This is going to be about 20 miles of blacktop, much of which is going to happen yet this construction season. So that's very exciting. Roads is another priority. We've made some small steps. I mentioned the $2.5 million, not a small sum of money, but the problem is much bigger than that, and we're going to continue to work on that. That's something that's going to continue. So I would say jobs in the economy, road funding, 2 very big ones.
Has the progress, you said basically 14% down to 7% unemployment, but as you termed it, not good enough. Has the progress been what you and others would have anticipated? The governor has even gone on record saying, we've made great progress, but he had that very rapid fire, we're going to do everything in dog years that he ran on an original campaign. Federal economy as a whole, or other factors not anticipated, how would we be looking at continuing policies, changing policies, adjusting the approach we've taken so far?
There's been a lot of change in the last 3 years, and that's one thing that's frustrating about change is you always have that lag. we don't change policy and immediately there's the correction. It takes time for the market to adjust to that. And I think that's what we're seeing right now. But we need to continue to make smart policy adjustments where they're needed so we can further foster that. And I think that, that's exactly what the governor talked about 3 years ago. What I talked about 3 years ago was that, government shouldn't be directly creating the jobs. We're not looking to grow the size of government here, but, foster that environment so that job creators will provide those jobs and create those jobs. And we're seeing exciting things across the state. Look at Detroit. A major problem that nobody was willing to tackle for decades. This is a problem that's been going back to the 60s. And it was really a perfect storm there of, not only the recession, but so heavily tied to the automotive sector and looking at the loss of population the city has struggled with. And so we've made some pretty serious changes there, and some exciting things are happening. So very optimistic. I said, 3.5 years ago that I'm optimistic on Michigan, even though we find her on the floor. There's so much that we can do, and it's been exciting to watch that happen. And I'm really looking forward to the next couple of years as these policy changes have time to really develop out in the private sector. We're going to see the additions in the way of new and additional jobs, and hopefully give us the resources that we need to invest in things like roads and in other areas.
Anything that's been left undone for whatever reason to this point, along with watching, as you say, the policies and everything happen in place, give the private sector the chance to correct those jobs. Is there any piece out there that's still waiting to get done, still needs to be hammered out in some way that can provide more of that fast track to the economic turnaround?
I think the biggest pieces have been done. When I ran 3 years ago, I talked about the Michigan business tax and what a hurdle that was, what a burden that was. We made those changes early on in 2011. We're seeing some benefit. Talking to folks locally, we've had jobs created here, investments that have been made, businesses that have been expanded because of that change. Another one that I talked about at that time was the change needed to be made to the personal property tax. That one was actually just made as the voters came along in huge number, 70-30 actually was the vote on this. We needed the public to vote on a piece of that personal property tax change, and they supported it. And so that's a change that is just now taking place, and that's going to take some time before we feel the effects of that. But it truly was a bad tax, and people on all sides of the issue, everyone agreed that was a bad tax, but the question was, how do you replace the revenue? And so that's what took a little time to work through.
About the only opposition that came out, and there was not much, we admit, from really either side of the aisle, but there was a message at the end that was pointing to some language and a chance for you to clarify in that vote that says that there's still, in essence, sort of a loophole. The harshest critics would say a back door that would allow for tax increase to come in on the back side of what now is being eliminated. What is that shift away from that personal property tax? How has that been written enough to do what it was intended to do?
Well, I'm not aware of any shortcomings in the language. I have not heard that. What it would do is it was a redirection of revenue. We've had a lot of, over the last decade or so, a lot of tax credits that have been awarded, whether you're looking at battery credits or things of this nature, certified credits that are expiring. And so what we were able to do was to direct that revenue that's now available as a result of these expiring, direct that to keep schools and local governments whole. So at the end, that we needed the vote of the people to be able to do that. We actually repealed the tax, needed the dedicated revenue stream. And that was important because, we worked with schools and local governments on this, and they said, we agree this is a bad tax, but we need assurances that the next legislature is not going to take that funding away. And so what we did was we went to the ballot, tied the hands of the legislature. The people have decided, and now that assurance is there that the replacement revenue is too.
On the issue of the funding for the roads, and we could extend this to funding for schools, we saw cuts that came to education. The governor has defended those, saying that we were dealing with the size of the deficit at the time. Now money has started to come back in, but we still look at that amount of money that still needs to go to keep money, stable funding for the schools, perhaps increase that as well as pay for the roads. What are the plans that are on the table? What would you be supporting that would be the best ways to continue to make sure that the money goes?
Absolutely. First, I want to say that we've got to get our priorities straight. You look at the state budget, it's in excess of $54 billion with a B that we spend each year. And this budget, as you study this budget and you look at all the areas of spending, it's truly frustrating. And you say, okay, we've got to get our priorities straight. When decisions are tough, families are getting their priorities straight. What are our priorities? Well, I think our priorities are road funding, or broader is infrastructure. It's also school funding, K-12 and other areas of education. And it's also public safety. And so we've got to get our priorities straight. But I think I want to dispel a myth that's out there, and it's being used to say that, you know, education funding has been cut at the state level. As to K-12, we're up over $1 billion of additional funding for K-12. What we've got to look at is the whole pie. There's a lot of state dollars that go into that our taxpayers pay directly, but there's also federal funding. And federal funding was down in that first budget significantly, but state dollars are up over $1 billion. So there is a lot of funding going to education. It's an area that we spend a lot of dollars, but we do that because it's so important. And so we need to continue to do that. What I've fought for is equality in funding. You know, since Proposal A, there's been a huge disparity as you go across the state as to how much each student per pupil is funded. In our area, it actually receives the lowest of that. And so what I've done with others that are similarly situated in rural areas is said we need to raise the bottom. And we've been able to do that the last couple of budget cycles, and it's been very exciting because a student here in the Mount Pleasant, Isabella County, Midland County area is worth every bit as much as a student from a wealthier area. And so we've been able to do that as there's been additional money going into education. We've put it at a disproportionate share more to the bottom. So we're working to continually close that gap, and that's exciting for our area, and that's something I want to continue to focus on, is to continue to close that gap.
If we look then at the issues of schools, roads, and public safety, if you were to bring all this down into a single message in our last half minute or so to leave that single message with a voter going to the polls, why should they get your vote for re-election?
Well, I would ask for their vote for re-election because I get how this works, and I get that state government is far too broad, too many areas of spending that we've got to redirect that. And it's all about getting your priorities straight. I think I have a great track record to support what I'm saying. You look at the funding that I fought for roads for Isabella County and Midland County. We've been delivering results, granted that there's more work to do. You look at education funding, not only the additional $1 billion to K-12 education, but also getting our priorities straight and raising the bottom, which affects this district directly. So I realize, and I totally grasp what the issues are facing the state, facing our region, facing our district, and now it's a matter of continued implementation. I say continued because we've made significant progress already, but there's still more work to do.
Well, we certainly appreciate your time addressing the issues and the voters as well, and wish you the best of luck the rest of the campaign. Thanks for being here.
Thank you so much, David. I always appreciate being with you.
And thank you for tuning in as well to this edition of Meet the Candidates. Our guest has been Kevin Cotter, the Republican representative for the 99th District House seat in the Michigan House. We urge all of you to get out and exercise your right to vote on November 4th.
Thank you for joining us for Meet the Candidates. CMU Public Broadcasting invited both major party candidates for this office to participate in this series. Remember to go to the polls on Election Day.
Hello again, and welcome to this edition of Meet the Candidates. I'm David Nicholas, and we are joined this time by Brian Mielke. He is the Democratic candidate for the 99th District seat in the Michigan House. Brian, it's good to see you. Thanks for joining us.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
First, in our first few moments, we do, as our title says, we get a chance to meet the candidates, maybe a little bit of personal background about you, hometown, and the experience that you bring to the campaign.
Sure. I was born in Michigan. My father was born in poverty and raised by his mother, and he worked his entire life in the automotive industry right here in Michigan. And you know, one thing I learned from him was don't take what you have for granted, and work hard for what you need or what your desires are. And my mother was a high school teacher, and she became a small business owner later in life, but she certainly instilled upon me the value of a quality education. And you know, so when I graduated from high school, I actually came right here to Mount Pleasant to get my education at Central Michigan University. And I felt Central Michigan University offered me the tools to prepare for a career in computer science. While I was a freshman here at CMU, I met my beautiful wife of 31 years, Deborah, and her father was a minister. And as a result of the job requirements of both of our parents' careers, we had to move a lot as kids. So when we got married here at Mount Pleasant, it was important to us to have a place that we call home, to raise a family, have a permanent home, if you will. And So we made our roots right here in Middle Michigan, and we chose Mount Pleasant because it still has that small town feel, but it also has a lot to offer for young families. And when I graduated with my master's at CMU in computer science, there's not a lot of job opportunities in this area for that type of education. So I decided to create an opportunity for myself, and I started a small business. My company develops software primarily for monitoring energy infrastructure. So it's used to monitor for integrity, which helps with public safety and prevent environmental disasters. And I'm very proud of the work that I've accomplished as a small business owner. It's been a great experience. But my career doesn't do a lot to help my community. And one thing I learned, my faith and my church are very important to me. And through leadership in church, I learned the value and the joy of giving back to your community. And so 6 years ago, I was approached to join our Union Township Planning Commission. And that was a great opportunity to give back in a way I haven't been able to through my church. I later joined the Economic Development Authority Board at Union Township. And in fact, in 2012 was the first attempt at running for a political office, and I was encouraged by community members to do so. And I'll tell you, I'm very proud of local government, and it is amazing to see virtually overnight decisions that you make that so positively affect the lives of the people in your community. And so I've learned to really value giving back. And as I get older now, I want to be able to look back and know that I was able to take advantage of the opportunities that were presented to me to give back to my community. I want to make a difference. And
you're running for the seat in the 99th district. For those that don't know the lines and the townships and the counties and how all these things are done in making up the map, tell us about District 99.
99th. The major population center, of course, is Mount Pleasant, and surrounding that is Union Township. That 99th consists of almost 2 counties, all of Isabella County and 10 of the townships in Midland County, and it's the 4 northern, 4 southern, and 4 western townships in Midland. So essentially creating a C, much like CMU, the C right around the city of Midland.
And as you've approached this, first from the standpoint of a candidate for the race and then the voters that you have talked to, what has been identified as the primary issues, challenges, concerns that people have for the campaign?
Yeah, my wife works at Mount Pleasant High School. She's a student support counselor. And so just about a year ago, I made the decision to run. And it was public education was my #1 issue. I saw firsthand the effects of our cuts to our public education system. And, but as you knock doors and you talk to people, and I can tell you I've talked to many thousands, the #1 issue for me is repealing that senior retirement tax and bringing back the homestead property tax credit that's been eliminated from many families. It is sad to see the number of seniors that have gone back to work just to keep their homes. Just 2 weekends ago, I was in Mount Haley Township knocking doors. I met an 82-year-old woman named Rose. She went back to work this year to keep her home because those taxes are squeezing our seniors. And when they were promised that those wouldn't be taxed, to change those rules on people that are vulnerable to this and cannot change the circumstances they're in, I think that was criminal. So despite the fact that public education is still just as important to me, when you start talking to people and you hear those stories, it's important for our seniors that we allow them to re-retire. It's only right.
For the structure, the constitutional requirement that we have a balanced budget, then with regards into the decisions that have been made, what is your proposal to change that structure and the way that the budget has been formulated with these concerns in mind? What would you do then to tackle that issue?
That's a great question. We do have a balanced budget requirement. And so it all comes down to priorities, right? And what we saw essentially 2 years ago was a historic tax shift. We increased taxes on seniors, middle class, that was done through the homestead property tax credit being eliminated for many families, the per child tax deduction, charitable donations, even the working poor was hit with drastic cuts to the earned income tax credit. And This was all $1.5 billion in new taxes on our Michigan families. And it wasn't to balance the budget at all. It was so we could afford 83% tax break to large corporations that are already making record profits, and the sales pitch for that was job creation. By the way, the tax increase 2 years ago when this was done, the exact words coming out of Lansing was a shared sacrifice. So while we were all given a shared sacrifice, large corporations were given the gift of these historic tax breaks to create jobs. Well, you know, where are the jobs? End of 2011, we were 12th highest in unemployment. We've risen at the end of August to 5th highest unemployment. You know, this is not the comeback state, I don't think. And if it is if that is a comeback, I have higher standards than that. We can do a lot better. And so I think when it comes back to answering how to pay for these things, I don't believe in giving tax breaks to corporations without strings attached. They did not create the jobs. These are large corporations that are, you know, Wall Street companies. They don't care about Michigan. They ship jobs overseas and still got the tax breaks. I'm a small business owner. I believe in small and medium-sized companies, and when they hire local. You know, and I think that's important. So I really want to look at encouraging economic development through our small and medium-sized companies. I mean, they create over half the jobs in our state.
And how do we do that if this other approach, as you position yourself as a candidate, say it has not worked, what approach would work?
Another good question. You know, as a small business owner, I see the struggles, the red tape. One thing that was very positive recently was eliminating that PPT tax, the personal property tax. You know, as a small business owner, it's not a large economic boost for my company, but it's a red tape. And we have a lot of red tape. And it's tough to start a new company in Michigan. So I think we need to streamline that process to encourage entrepreneurs to start new companies. I believe we spend way too many of our tax dollars out of state for state contracts. My company, again, software development, so technology is near and dear to me. So I looked at the Michigan Department of Technology and was kind of curious where the money went. Last year in 2013 alone, we sent over $7 billion out of state for state contracts. That is a huge drain on our economy, and I think we can do a much better job in giving first crack at Michigan companies to get those contracts. And I don't care if it costs 20% more to give a contract local. If we're spending slightly more for that contract, you know, lowest bid is not always best bid, right? If we're spending local, that will sustain jobs here, create jobs here, and those people that get the paychecks from those jobs will likely spend majority of their paychecks right here back in Michigan. I believe that will drive our economy. When you take $3 billion out of people's pockets with the new taxes we've seen, that shared sacrifice I talked about, that's $3 billion out of people's pockets that typically spend it. Seniors, middle-class, hardworking families, and the working poor. When you take $3 billion out of the economy, it's no wonder that we've risen from 12th in unemployment to 5th in unemployment, highest unemployment. I don't know if I answered your question. I was trying.
What then specifically would be, do you think, the best single approach, if you were to narrow that down, just our last couple of minutes, to address the overall issue of the economic growth, the restructuring or reprioritization of the budget? What would be your first priority then to make sure that economic growth is re-stimulated in the way you feel it should be?
Well, again, I think it goes back to, I believe our country was built on quality education and a hardworking middle class. That is the strength of what made our country great. And I think when you're punishing our middle class, you're stagnating our economy. So I think putting money back in people's pockets, repealing some of these taxes. I would like to repeal the senior retirement taxes, bring back the homestead property tax credit, the $600 per child tax deduction, and those will, I think, instill just economic driving, because consumerism drives an economy more than anything else. But we need to do a better job with our education. we have a brain drain happening in our state. We need to give incentives for people to stay and work here. When our most educated and skilled workers are leaving the state, there's nothing that's going to attract companies to base here because we don't have the workforce. And so it's very important that I think we invest in our education.
And in the final 30 seconds that we have, if you were to sum up all of these points, and some of them have been very specific, what would be the final message you would leave with the voter, that person getting set to go to the polls? What's that final message to them?
What it really comes down to, I think our politicians are out of touch with Michigan families, and I think it's evident in our tax structure that we're representing large corporations, large donors over the people. And if the tax shift that we've seen isn't proof of that, I don't know what is. And you know, I believe in democracy. I'm a little disappointed in it. I don't think we're representing the people anymore. And it is time to get some of the money out of politics and start representing our own people. And that begins with repealing some of these harmful taxes that we've seen levied on families.
Well, we appreciate your time and attention to the issues and wish you best of luck with the rest of the campaign.
Appreciate it so much. Thank you.
Thank you. And thank you for your time and attention as well. We've been talking with Brian Mielke, the 99th District candidate, Michigan House District Democratic candidate for that office. We encourage all of you to go out and exercise your right to vote on Tuesday, November 4th.
This has been Meet the Candidates, a production of CMU Public Broadcasting. Both major party candidates were invited to participate in this series. For a complete listing of the air dates and times for this series, go to our website, wcmu.org.